It's really hard to believe it's already 20 years. I mean, it really feels like it's yesterday. I think to most of us who were a part of this, that day is always going to be like yesterday. I was an instructor at the EMS Academy for FDNY. I was on a job for about 10 years at that point, and I was teaching at the academy. We had a full building of students that were coming in and doing their courses to maintain their certification. So we teach all of our own EMTs and paramedics at the academy. So we were doing that, and it was a beautiful day. You know, it was just a day like any other day. And we were in the classroom, we were practicing some skills, and we hear that a plane hit the World Trade Center. And we just automatically, you know, thought maybe it's a small, you know, Cessna or something small. Couldn't be anything serious, you know. And we all found ourselves to the televisions that were on and reporting this out, understanding that we're all first responders. So we have a building filled, multiple buildings actually filled with first responders who are all prepared to respond even while they're in training. So we wanted to get a sense of what was going on, and we ran to the televisions to see what was happening. And it was just unbelievable that we saw that it was a commercial plane, you know, a regular passenger plane that had hit the tower. And we all thought, this is a terrible accident. You know, this is just something, how tragic is this? And what is this gonna mean for us? But, you know, we're in a city with very large buildings, and sometimes, you know, things like this can happen. It was a very short time later that we found out that it was not an accident. And, you know, the second plane had hit the other tower. And then we started getting reports about other areas of the country. It was just a moment of, it couldn't be true. Like, this just couldn't be true. Like, the twins, we called it, right? The twins had stood over us strong for my entire lifetime, as long as I remember it. They were part of our skyline and just part of our everyday. And here they are, you know, being attacked by commercial planes filled with people. It was just an unbelievable day. But at that moment, we knew that we were going to have to respond, you know, that this was going to be a major event for EMS as a medical team, right? So we were definitely going to have some work to do, and we started to put the pieces in place at the academy to get everybody mobilized. So we're here at the academy, we're getting everybody equipped. There's not enough radios and ambulances and equipment to staff, you know, everybody who's at training. So how do we move buildings worth of first responders down to this site? Well, we have a MTA hub, which is our bus services, and they were right at the base of the academy, and one of our officers had gone down there and basically commandeered city buses. And the city buses came up to our building, and we started loading in on the city buses. And we started to make our way down to the scene in a convoy kind of format. We're filled with people, we have our equipment, we're ready to go. There's an odd and eerie silence that's going on. Like we don't really know what we're walking into. We know that 2 planes had hit the towers. We knew that had to be a bad thing for the city, that there was going to be a lot of people who were hurt, but we weren't really sure what was happening. We didn't even know if the attack was over, right? Like, was there going to be other buildings, that other planes or other people being attacked? We just didn't know. But we knew we had to go, and we did. And we got on a bus and we started going down, and I remember being on the highway in the bus, and you could see the towers from where we were. And, you know, the first tower fell. It disappeared, which was unbelievable, right? This can't even be true. So, you know, we continue to make our way down there. And by the time we get down there, we're all in the buses, we're pulling up, you know, several blocks away, Now there is a pile of twisted steel and dust and things. And by the time we were getting down there, the second tower had fallen. And we got enveloped in the dust. You know, we were still in the bus, so we were somewhat safe from that. But now the second tower had gone down. So it was very chaotic. I mean, obviously nobody expected in our lifetime to see these two buildings that we grew up with that overshadowed our everyday lives to be, you know, in a twisted mess in the middle of Manhattan, the biggest and most important city in the world, if you ask a New Yorker. So we started, you know, getting ourselves prepared to respond down to where the pile, as we called it, ended up being. And I was a more senior instructor at that point, so I had been assigned to what we would call forward triage. Forward triage meaning the location closest to the event so that I can triage out, which is medically sort out the patients from critical to non-critical patients. So we were assigned with a group down there, and they put us in a building that was like very close, like right on the pile. We were gonna stage there. And it didn't take a long time to figure out there was nobody to triage. There just was nobody to triage, you know, and anybody who was there was under the pile, and, you know, it was still very early in the event, so there weren't a lot of people there that we could help. So, you know, people who could get out, got out and ran on their own to get out of the way of things, and people who couldn't get out were still under the rubble. So there was nobody to triage at that point. And the group that I was in converted into a forward morgue. And, you know, it was really about finding and identifying people who were in the rubble. So we did that for what felt like an eternity. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 plus hours that I was down there doing that with that group. Now remember that we had gotten down there on city buses. There weren't radios to give us. We all had our own equipment, so, you know, we were supplied in that sense, but there was really no plan to get us back out of there, right? Like they got us in there, and we were all there for the long term to just get this job done. And we were all very committed to doing that because we had lost hundreds of our own people in there as well. Not only the people who filled these buildings, but the people who went to save these people who filled these buildings. We had lost them all. And, you know, we weren't gonna quit. So I remember just being, you know, it was sometime the next day, I was just so exhausted. The type of exhaustion that doesn't allow for your knees to hold the rest of your body weight up. And I had made my way up to where the staging location was, and people at that point had been sending blankets and bags of clothing, and, you know, they're trying to do anything they could. The city really did come together and try to support the first responders. And I remember just falling asleep on the concrete on top of a bag of like blankets, and it started to rain, and, you know, I couldn't go any further. So I slept there for a little while and then got back up and went back down to the site. And it was a while before I realized at some point I gotta go home. You know, my family doesn't know whether I'm in this rubble or not, because I showed up to work and didn't come home either, right? And there were no cell phones that worked because the tower was on top of the towers that just went down. So there was no real service. We were busy. Like, I didn't get to call my family. You know, cell phones weren't a big deal back then. Not everybody had one. So I had to figure out how we were gonna get home, or at least how I was gonna get home. I had 2 small children at that time. I actually ended up hitchhiking from other first responders and people who were dropping things off down at the city, hitchhiking my way back to the Bronx. And I went directly to my daughter's high school because I hadn't seen her, just to let her know I was okay, you know. And then I went home, I'd showered and I was covered in dust and dirt and exhausted. I slept for a while and then got back up and went back down. And that became our routine. Our routine was keep going until you find everybody. Everybody was just really unified in that mission. And you didn't think about what you were doing or why you were doing it. You just knew you had to do it. And I think people felt like that in New York City too. People didn't know what to do or how to do it. They just felt like they needed to do something. And some people would bring food, or some people would drop like blankets or, waters, or they would line the West Side Highway. I'll never forget this. The West Side Highway for us is a big highway. It's a very busy highway. And there was nobody on it. It was closed to first responders only. And they would line the highway with thank you signs, Very similar to what we saw in this pandemic with the, banging the pots at 7 p.m. and things like that. So it was a lot of support for the first responders. But it was a difficult time, and I think, 20 years later, I still smell it like as if it was yesterday. I think most people do, at least the people that were there. But now we're 20 years into this. There are people who work here who weren't even born when this happened. So this is really a story to them. So it's important that we tell the story. So I'm thankful that you're telling this story, because I think people need to hear it. That's a really great question. And I think I'm going to probably take it from a more personal perspective, because I could certainly talk about, if you see something, say something. I could talk about situational awareness. I could talk about being prepared to respond, in a professional manner and render emergency care and things like that. But I'm going to talk about something that's even more important, which is don't sweat the little things, right? Like thousands of people got up and went to work. That was it. They went to work and they didn't come back. And some of them, maybe fought about leaving the milk out, or, not picking out the garbage, or, something silly. And does any of that really matter? So for me, you can't really shake me. Like those little things are just not important. What is important is humanity. And I think we're suffering a little bit right now trying to find that. But it's important that you just don't sweat the little things. The people who are around you that love you and you love, they should know that every day. And those little things that annoy you about them are the things you'll miss. So why bother, right? Why waste time? Have a good life, right? Choose to be positive. Choose to give. Choose to be compassionate and forgiving, and, choose to be a part of the solution and not the problem. And I think sometimes we lose that. It's odd that 20 years ago we were dealing with the biggest thing our country had seen. And 20 years from then, we're dealing with the biggest thing our country has seen. In this global pandemic with, more than 500,000 people dead of this virus that we're trying to get a handle on. And the level of humanity, I would say, is a little different right now than it was 20 years ago. So it's important to bring yourself back to that. Like, if this person went to work and didn't come back, what would you want to say? So say it, right? So say it. Say it while you have a chance. And everything else falls in place. I think that would be the message I would take, and say, that's an important one.